So yesterday, 2 articles came out from Game Informer magazine, one of which you have easy access to, and I already posted a link to it on the community page. The other one you have to have a subscription to get access to, but both of them confirm a lot of the things that we already knew about the Player's Handbook, and the second one gives us new information about the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, 2 of the biggest reveals in the article is the cover of the Player's Handbook and Greyhawk as a campaign setting. And if you want to skip ahead to the Greyhawk part, check the timestamp in the description and pinned in the comments. But let's start with the Player's Handbook that's coming out in September. The new cover is by freelance illustrator Tyler Jacobson, who also did the cover for the 2014 Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. This new cover has a much stronger color contrast, which makes the characters really pop and stand out visually. I didn't like the almost monochromatic look of the old covers. The Player's Handbook was all very yellow, the Monster Manual was all very blue, and the Dungeon Master's Guide was all very purple. This has a much more exciting presence, which gives you a more inviting cover, which includes some classic D&D characters: Yolande the Elven Queen, Strongheart the Knight, Elkhorn the Dwarven Warrior, the roguish Molivar, and the Divine Mercurian. I like this new cover much better than the 2014 cover because it has a whole party of adventurers, not just 1 or 2 characters on the cover. Having a whole party on the cover captures the feeling of the game, which is something Wizards of the Coast has said. They want each cover to evoke the feeling that comes with that part of the game. So the Player's Handbook cover is designed to exemplify what it feels like to be a player in the game, which makes me really curious to see what the cover of the Dungeon Master's Guide is going to look like. Maybe that cover should be set on the plane of Mechanicus, with a wizard trying to create time in order to schedule their D&D campaign. This article further confirms that there will be a full-page art piece for each character class. We've already seen the Dwarven Fighter, and this article also shows off the Human Wizard. This article also includes a lot of concept art and work-in-progress art, and I'm sure that's to combat any concerns about AI art. We already knew this, but the article gives us more images of the background art. By background, I mean your character backgrounds. So there is a dedicated art piece for each character background, just like there's a dedicated art piece for each character class. We had already been told that there was going to be subclass art as well. Each subclass is going to have its own art piece, and we actually get a confirmation of one of those. As you can see, a halfling wild magic sorcerer. And I believe this next piece is the Fiend Patron Warlock. The second article goes on to confirm that there are indeed 4 subclasses for each class, which I find interesting because we were already told by the Unearthed Arcana articles that we were getting Thief, Arcane Trickster, Assassin, and Swashbuckler as the 4 subclasses for the Rogue. And then we were more recently told that we are going to get the Psyknife subclass for the Rogue. So if it's true, like we originally thought, that we're only getting 4 subclasses per class, that means one of those first 4 is getting replaced with the Psyknife. So let me know in the comments which one you think is going away. So will the Psyknife replace the Thief, the Arcane Trickster, the Assassin, or the Swashbuckler? Another cool thing is we're going to get individual pictures of the different weapons, something that previous editions of D&D had that 2014 didn't. The article specifically gives the example of the difference between a halberd and a glaive. The second article elaborates that the new Player's Handbook will have several features designed to help new players understand how to play the game, which I think is a great feature. It's also going to include 75 different feats, and when you choose your background at first level, you'll be able to get a feat along with that background, and your ability bonuses will be based on background instead of on species. Again, those are things you may have already known from previous articles. So last month, when Jeremy Crawford revealed that the Goliath was going to be added to the core rulebook as one of the species, I asked you to comment on my video about what other species you thought they were going to include. And some of you correctly guessed orc, because they're doing away with the half-orc, so it makes sense that the orc is going to be added to the core. And some of you made your guess based on the tiefling, since that was already included in the core classes. It would make sense that a mirror image of the tiefling, the Aasimar, would now be included, and you guys were correct. So Goliath, Aasimar, and tiefling are all now part of the core rules. The other exciting thing is they're including new tool descriptions with specific game actions for each tool set, and along with that, a crafting section that also includes making scrolls and potions. What I find most important about that is it feels like the designers are really listening to the community, while Hasbro doesn't seem to care about the community. The designers of the game themselves are clearly listening to complaints that players have had and are addressing as many of those as they can in the new edition. One last thing about the Player's Handbook, there will be an appendix for the multiverse and the various Dungeons & Dragons settings. This is something they've recently leaned into. We've seen that in the new subclass design, and I talked about that in a previous video. We also saw that in the new Vecna Eve of Ruin adventure. Some of you have said that that's nothing new to Dungeons & Dragons, that D&D has always been a multiverse, and you are correct. However, the 2014 release of D&D really drilled down on the Forgotten Realms, and they didn't start doing the other campaign settings till almost the end of this 10-year run. And the designers seem to be embracing that in what I think is a really smart way, capitalizing on the fact that Marvel movies have already brought the multiverse to a general audience. So it's easier for Dungeons & Dragons to now lean into that multiverse concept, which is a much better marketing strategy, building the core rulebooks around the concept of a multiverse that includes all these different campaign settings. Because in previous editions, the different campaign settings competed with each other. For example, when I was a kid, we loved Dragonlance so much that we never played Planescape or Darksun. And that was part of the problem with the old TSR company, is that they were losing money on those campaign setting products. WotC has struggled to limit the size of those campaign settings in order to maintain profitability, which has further disappointed fans. But hopefully we're going in a new direction here by describing Dungeons & Dragons as a multiverse, and that all these campaign settings are part of that same multiverse, as well as your homebrew setting is a part of that same multiverse. That seems like a much better marketing strategy than trying to compartmentalize the various campaign settings and make them compete against each other in the marketplace. So instead, they're now refreshing 5th edition with a whole new tone of world-hopping adventures, so that your characters can travel from Dragonlance to Spelljammer to Greyhawk. Yes, Greyhawk. Greyhawk is going to be officially brought into the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to see that in the new Dungeon Master's Guide. For those of you who don't know, Greyhawk was Gary Gygax's original campaign setting, and is technically the very first setting for Dungeons & Dragons products, which is a blast from the 1970s past, which is perfect for the 50th anniversary year of Dungeons & Dragons. And the new Dungeon Master's Guide is actually going to explain how to make a campaign setting, and they're going to use Greyhawk to do it. So they're taking Greyhawk and using it as a teaching tool to help new Dungeon Masters understand how to build their own campaign setting. Not only is it giving you Greyhawk, it's also giving you instructions and insight into how Greyhawk was built and how you could do a similar thing for your homebrew world. I think that's a good way to both give us Greyhawk and honor the setting at the same time. So along with the appendix in the Player's Handbook, there's also going to be a lore glossary in the new Dungeon Master's Guide. And that lore glossary will give you even more details on the multiversal settings of Dungeons & Dragons. The new DMG promises to teach DMs more about running the game, which will include encounter design, sample maps, advice on how to prepare your sessions, and advice on what to put on your Dungeon Master screen. And hold on a minute, we already talked about potions and scrolls, but the new DMG is going to include rules for buying and making magic items. I know, again, that's something a lot of people have really wanted, and now they're telling us they're going to finally deliver on that big request the community has had. All in all, they are promising concrete tools for Dungeon Masters, and that is something that has been desperately needed for a long time. Now, I know some of you are going to say, yeah, but are they going to do a good job of it? Well, they only have so many pages in the book, so I don't think it's ever going to be as complete as we really want it, but that's what I'm here and all the rest of us Dungeon Tubers are here for, is to help you do those things. So while we're at it, go ahead and click like, and if you haven't subscribed, please do that too. I am so close to 5,000 subscribers, and I'm really looking forward to that. Now, last but not least, we have the Monster Manual, which promises to be the biggest monster manual yet, with 500 monsters. And the article says that no stat block goes untouched, that they've adjusted every stat block from the 2014 version to a new and improved version. It also says it's going to include families of monsters, and the article gives the example of vampires, how it'll now include multiple types of vampires, including younger vampires who are still growing in their power, the vampire we're already familiar with, and the Nightbringer, a much more powerful version of the vampire. These monster families include a narrative, to help you understand the progression as these creatures grow in power, which will help you use these creatures at lower tiers of play, mid tiers of play, and high tiers of play. The article also points out that there will be varied NPC groups as well. So for example, the 2014 Monster Manual had bandits and a bandit captain, but those two stat blocks weren't really enough to fully represent bandits across a wide spectrum of play. These varied groups include, but are not limited to, bandits, pirates, entertainers, and mages. And of course, this will help you when you prep your encounters so that you don't have to do as much customization to your NPC stat blocks, because there will be a wider range of stat blocks to choose from. Now, last and probably best is that there are going to be epic monsters, and an epic monster of each monster type. And the article gives us 4 examples. So for oozes, we're going to have the Blob of Annihilation. So imagine a gelatinous cube that's big enough to swallow an entire town. An elemental so powerful that it can devastate an entire region's ecosystem. An arch hag to represent an epic level fey creature, and a colossal construct that's big enough to step on buildings. So that was a whole lot. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm actually impressed with how much they are including in these core rulebooks, and if they live up to all the promises made in this article, I think it's going to be a really good set. Of course, we're going to have to wait and see as each of the books come out, but this one seems to be really striving to do it right, and it really seems like the design team is on the right track. Now, I know for the past month I've really focused on 5th edition D&D. Don't worry, I'm working on an old school video and a Shadowdark video that are going to be coming soon. In the meantime, I'm hitting the road to go to Green Dragon Fest, so you'll probably get some footage of that too. As always, thanks again for visiting the Dire Den, and I'll see you next time.